Good morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. Would you please join me for our gathering hymn number 100 in the gray hymnal, Peace Like a River. We're going to sing verses 1 through 3 only. Please rise in body or spirit as you are willing and able. Number 100.
Once everybody's ready, we'd all be to play the last bar. This is so familiar, you guys should just be okay. Everybody ready?
Sanctuary and online to the Sunday service of the Unitarian Universalist congregation of Oxford. I am Reverend Sarah Osborne, the halftime minister of UUCO, and this is different, me being the worship associate today, so this is fun. And I am delighted to bring to you today the worship service, Reclaiming Heritage, Belonging, and Biodiversity with our guest speaker, Mitchell Robinson. Mitch is a Mississippi native, ecologist, arborist, and community conservationist based in Holly Springs. And Mitch, come say hi.
Thank you all. Well, I'll save some of this for the homily, but it's just interesting to me how the world turns, particularly that the first time I came and spoke to this group was about this week 6 years ago, 2019, and was looking through some of the stuff I spoke about back then, and that my mind hasn't wandered too far from that, and it seems like it gets more important each day. So I really appreciate the opportunity to be in communion with all today, and looking forward to hopefully having this, selfishly for UUCO, also be a little bit of a springboard for some of the things we've talked about with the grounds here and talking about expanding this community beyond the walls of this structure here too. So.
Thanks. And whether you are a longtime member or first-time visitor, we welcome you. Come with an open mind, a loving heart, and willing hands. You are welcome here no matter your age, your size, your color of your hair or skin or eyes. Come whatever your abilities, whomever you love, you belong here. So we have a couple of announcements to make. We have Oxford Pride is coming up, and UCO has signed up to participate in the parade and organizational fair. And if you are interested in participating, you should probably see me or Reverend Gail Stratton for more information. And I think there will be a nice little group gathering to participate in that. Also, there is a NAMI mental health awareness meeting, small workshop at the library. This will be an opportunity for understanding mental health in our community and discussing NAMI's role and resources, such as education programs, support groups, and advocacy efforts. And this is on Thursday, April 24th at 4 p.m. at the Lafayette County Oxford Library. And I am in town this week and through Wednesday for my Sarah Social, so if you would like to get coffee, share a meal, chat with me in person, I am available. Just come talk to me after the service today. And today, huh?
So we have a big announcement.
Well, I was gonna get to you. Would you like to make this, Cheryl? Cheryl, come on. No, I was gonna say today is our monthly potluck, and we invite everyone here to participate in that, whether you brought food or not. There is enough to share. And we have today after the service a special town hall meeting where you can ask questions about the upcoming agenda for our congregational meeting, which is the last Sunday in April. But more importantly, what we're going to celebrate that Cheryl was teasing to whet your appetite is we have a huge announcement, and that is that UUCO has met its Faithify campaign. Through massive efforts of sharing, through lots of letter writing by Cheryl and the board members, reaching out to every single congregation across the whole continent, we have raised $14,550. So you're going to be hearing a lot about OWL, about that's Our Whole Lives sexual health program. We are going to be known in this community in North Mississippi for educating, for helping people develop relationships. And as part of that, which I'm sure was announced last time because I wasn't here, we know that Afton and Wendy and Eddie got trained in facilitating OWLs, and it was a huge labor of love. The people up there in Memphis love them. They represented UCO so well. It was so thrilling. And I also got trained in adult OWL. So now we can also start doing adult OWL, which is really, really exciting. There's young adult, regular, like medium adult, and then older adult OWL. So it's going to be a really exciting next year as we and the efforts of the board to do this big thing that we did.
It's technically not over till Tuesday.
Yeah, so you can still give and you can still share. I mean, we can see if we can blow the roof off of it, so we'll see. Does anybody else have any other announcements that I may have forgotten? Okay. And as a reminder, these slips for grief, gratitude, and growth are available from the greeter. If you have a moment you'd like to share, please write them down, and then you will have an opportunity to drop those slips in the collection basket during the offering so they can be read aloud later in the service. As Unitarian Universalists, we're a people of diverse beliefs, but we share a common faith that every person is worthy of love. That what we do in this world matters, that we are connected to one another and to this earth, And we come together for worship, which for us as Unitarian Universalists is defined as giving honor, reverence, and regard to something. In our congregation, worship does not refer to adoration, but more often to reverence and gratitude for the wonder of nature and of simply being. With all ages, abilities, and learning styles in mind as the Sunday services team and I plan our time together. Upholding our shared values, we come together today to celebrate our interdependence and honor the spirit of generosity, all of which is centered in love. So it is good to be together in this pluralistic congregation as we work towards a planet transformed by our care. And please take a moment to silence your cell phones, because we are going to enter now into a time of sacred celebration with this call to worship by Reverend Gretchen Haley. Come in, all who long to know how to love this world, how to keep eyes open, hands unclenched, arms wide, breathing deeply in and out. This is a time to practice, because there is still so much good and beauty and joy. But it can be hard to keep telling this tale with all the news and the wind and the rain and the trembling earth. Who wants to love this life anyway? Come in, all who teeter on the edge of cynicism, brokenhearted, and trying still to remember laughter and kindness and the chance to be alive. In these days when so much is at just giving each other courage to take this path is not always easy, to keep practicing this love that will not let us go, and still calls upon us. So come and let us worship together. And with laughter and kindness and so much love, let us engage in a practice of joy by offering a gesture of holy hospitality. In a moment, you will be invited to share a greeting with the folks around you. Extend a hand in peace, offer a hug, or perhaps simply a word of welcome. And as a practice of consent, if you would prefer not to engage in this ritual, simply place a hand over your heart, maybe close your eyes, and people will respect your choice. And now, please turn to the person on your left or your right and briefly greet your neighbor. You might have to use that lighter. I don't know if that's working very good. And now, with that sparkle of mirth and reverence running through us, let us light the sacred symbol of our faith, our flaming chalice. Spirit cupped in earth's embrace, light of love, alive in all creation. As we kindle this flame, we rekindle our connection to the sacred web of life. And if you would rise in body or spirit, if you're willing and able to join me in our community hymn, number 203, and we're going to sing verses 1 through 4. And Dan will help lead us on when we come in on this one.
We haven't done this much walking, so I'll play it through once.
Please be seated. And now is the time in service for our Time for All Ages. And I thought it would be appropriate to explore a reflection on the holy day celebrating liberation of Passover, because that began last night. And this is a reflection by Kathleen McTeague. When the escape from Egypt was certain, and when the last furious wave had closed over their enemies' heads and the dangerous waters lay smooth again, when the Israelites could finally turn towards the future without fear that the past would snatch them back, what did they see before them? Not the promised land flowing with milk and honey, but the wide and terrifying wilderness that would claim them for 40 long, hard years of wandering. They were not carried along on a surge of vindicated faith, but stumbled forward with paralyzing doubt. And instead of enjoying sweet unity after all they'd been through, they were torn by bickering and division. And they walked into relentless uncertainty and discomfort and fell asleep on the hard ground, to wake feeling ashamed for dreaming of the easier life of slavery they had left behind. Our own stories will never be quite so dramatic, perhaps, yet each of us knows a little about what it means to be lost in the wilderness. We know the awful disappointment akin to despair of being suddenly pathless and alone when we expected to stride confidently straight into the promised land. And we know how it feels to take a leap of faith forward, someplace we want to be, in love or relationship, in work or school or location, only to find that nothing turned out the way we'd hoped or expected. The familiar has been left behind, but what we yearn for has not yet come into view. And there we are, lost in the desert. We have no way to know for how long our wandering will last. And these passages through the land of in-between are scary and uncomfortable. And the desert is a place we would rather barrel through as quickly as possible towards the welcoming ground of our destination. But our time in the desert is a passage of the heart, not a physical journey of the body, and it's not in our power to speed it up. I have never been lost in a literal desert, but there was a time in my life when I visited one every year. When I lived in San Francisco area, every spring for 5 years, I traveled with a friend to the low desert just over the California border into Arizona, where we camped for a week in the middle of nowhere. And every year the experience was the same. At first, especially after the damp lushness of the Bay Area, the landscape seemed absolutely barren and dead. And then my eyes would adjust, and I'd start to notice all the complicated forms of life that thrived there. The dryness of the air made things crystal clear, even at great distances. And the desert light drew breathtaking colors out of the rocks and shadows. And at night, there were the incredible desert stars. And I hold my lessons from the southwestern desert close to my heart. They can sustain me through the desert of the heart and soul, where when I wander in the wilderness of the in-between, our inner deserts have something to offer us too. It's hard to fight the impulse to get out of the place of passage as quickly as possible. But each day we spend there, no matter how uncomfortable, is a precious day of our lives. What strange gifts might it offer to us if we can calm ourselves enough to look? After 40 years in the desert, the Israelites that in the ancient myth finally reached its end. They touched life-giving waters again and waded into the Jordan, amazed and glad. And maybe they knew, even in that moment of deep relief and readiness, that the desert wasn't accidental, that it had opened and cleansed them in some necessary way. And maybe they understood how the wilderness had sharpened their awareness and softened their hearts, so that they at long last could receive not just the gifts of the promised land, but the gifts of the desert that had brought them there. This comes from the resource Shine and Shadow.
So now we're going to have a responsive reading. This is called The Wisdom to Survive by Wendell Berry. So please join me. It's found in the Great Hymnal, number 465. I'll read the first regular thought to you, and if you would, join me in responding by the italic lines below. If we will have the wisdom to survive, to stand like slow-growing trees on a ruined place,
renewing and enriching it.
If we will make our seasons welcome here, asking not too much of earth or heaven,
Then a long time after we are dead, the lives our lives prepare will live here.
their houses strongly placed upon the valley sides,
Fields and gardens rich in the windows, the river will run clear as we will never know it.
and over it, birdsong like a canopy.
On the levels of the hills will be green meadows, stock bells in human shade.
On the steeps, where greed and ignorance cut down the old forest,
An old forest will stand, its rich leaf fall drifting on its roots.
the veins of forgotten springs will have opened. Families will be singing in the fields.
In their voices they will hear music risen out of the ground.
They will take nothing from the ground, they will not return, whatever the grief at parting.
Memory, native to this valley, will spread over it like a robe, and memory will grow into legend, legend into song, song into sacrament.
The abundance of this place, the songs of its people and its birds will be health and wisdom and indwelling light.
This is no paradisal dream. its hardship is its possibility.
Eric Walker Wickstrom said, "The Lord loves a cheerful giver, yet we will accept from a grouch as well." As we prepare to take this morning's offering, may we, each of us, look into not just our wallets or our checkbooks to see how much we have with us, but let us also look into our hearts and see what is available there. How much love, how much generosity, how much faith, and how much gratitude, how much hope. And let us take our offering from that account. As always, our collection is split, with half going to our monthly Share the Plate designee and half going to support the mission of UUCO. And our Share the Plate designee this month is the Mississippi Presenters Network, which operates in a non-competitive, cooperative spirit and is dedicated to bringing artists and presenters together across the state, and is designed to help increase economic opportunity, diversity, professional development opportunities, and cooperation amongst art organizations in the state. And also, please remember to drop any notes of grief, gratitude, or growth, those are joys or sorrows, in the offering basket as they go around. And now, our morning offering will be gratefully received. For the gifts which we have received and the gifts which we are ourselves, may we be truly grateful. May we be committed to using these gifts to make a difference in the world, to increase love and justice, to decrease hate and oppression, to expand beloved community, to share and to keep sharing as long as ever we can. Amen. And now we will enter into the ritual like the one before us, to lay what is on our hearts and lay it at the altar of community and spirit, using a pebble dropped into a bowl of water to symbolize the ripple effects of the events of our lives upon the larger community. We will now share the grief, gratitude, and moments of growth that have touched our lives since we were last together. And of course, our first pebble is one of gratitude and joy for our visitors and friends. We offer a warm welcome to you. We are so happy that you are with us. Okay. From Mary Caha, please send healing thoughts for our UU friend, Ken Sleeper, who is actually here today. And to Michael and Betsy and Leon, prayers for victims in the hospital bombing. And then I'll do a follow-up from Ken himself. I really appreciate how the caring and supportive community came together to help Susan and my family during these difficult times. It means a lot to know that there is a community to depend on in times of need. P.S. In all of this, I have rediscovered the simple luxury of talcum powder. From Valerie Booth. A moment of growth. The Oxford Police Department's Victim Services Units was recognized by the State Attorney General this past week for their work with victims of crime in Mississippi. Due to the efforts of this unit, domestic violence is down in Oxford from the previous year. Yes, yes. From James, gratitude for the crew and cast of Julius Caesar at the university's theater department. It was a great production. From Pat, a gratitude for the 13 people who participated in Workday at UUCO yesterday. Yes, 52 hours of work equity. You were awesome. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And from Wendy Franger, a gratitude. I want to lift up the fact that our congregation put an extraordinary amount of effort into ensuring our Faithify campaign to support OWL has succeeded. Big shout out to our president, Cheryl Conley, who wrote 700 plus emails to spread the word. And that's not an exaggeration.
And she wasn't always
Nice about it.
She was very focused in her office and didn't want to be disturbed.
Nice about it.
And Wendy also says it isn't just about the campaign, it's about celebrating us. And indeed, we celebrate UCO. And finally, we drop a pebble into the water for all the grief, gratitude, and moments of growth that remain unspoken. All that we hold in our hearts for ourselves and for each other and for this world is held in this community and by a love that is limitless. Amen. Thank you. And now, please, yes.
I'm sorry, if you'll indulge me one second, I just
Sure.
wanted to add one thing. Cheryl can certainly give you more details about this, but she was sharing with me some of the emails that she reached out to people, you know, ministers, REs and stuff like that, and the positive responses they got. They all know about UUCO now. They are all, I mean, whenever we feel like we're alone or whatever, there are congregations literally all over the country now who know about us, who support us, who think, wow, this is a great thing that you guys are doing. So I think that could bring, you know, a lot of goodwill and stuff in.
Yeah.
Yay.
Yeah.
Yay, Cheryl.
UUCO is on the map in a big way, and we are developing a reputation in our faith movement as tiny and mighty and growing. So, yes, and on that note, let us sing together with a meditation, and you can just remain seated. It's our beloved number 1, 2, 3, Spirit of Life.
You want to do it once or twice?
Yeah, play through.
Twice?
Yeah, let's do it twice. We'll do it twice. And it's short.
We're together for the last 4 chapters. Is that your collection?
All the stories of redemption.
reading by Wendell Berry called Questionnaire. Number 1, how much poison are you willing to eat for the success of the free market and global trade? Please name your preferred poisons. Number 2, for the sake of goodness, how much evil are you willing to do? Fill in the following blanks with the names of your favorite evils and acts of hatred. Number 3, what sacrifices are you prepared to make for culture and civilization? Please list the monuments, shrines, and works of art you would most willingly destroy. Number 4, in the name of patriotism and the flag, how much of our beloved land are you willing to desecrate? List in the following spaces the mountains, rivers, towns, farms you could most readily do without. And number 5, state briefly the ideas, ideals, or hopes, the energy sources, the kinds of security for which you would kill a child. Name, please, the children whom you would be willing to kill.
Thank you all for taking the time to join today. I can tend to be long-winded, if any of you know me, so I've set myself a little timer. Or y'all just do the Oscar, yank me off.
Maybe like 20 minutes.
All right. So I've been doing engagement at this intersection of diversity and biodiversity for some time, and I have a lot of faults, and I'll talk a little bit about that, but I just wanted to be transparent here that I am a perfectionist for good and bad, and I'm trying to get out of that. So I did not prepare for today. That's not to be dismissive of this group, but is to be intentional around having some faith in myself and with these ideas that I've been poring over for some time. Part of that comes from the place that I've talked about this topic a lot, probably to the chagrin of some of my family and friends that I can't let it go. To the point that I lost a job over it, managing a former slave plantation in Holly Springs that was owned by the Audubon Society, that still is. Talking about these notions of whose stories can be told, whose stories should be told, who has the right to be a storyteller. And when that was in April, God, it was 5 years ago, this week, it was April 22nd, 50th anniversary of Earth Day. So I didn't know what I was going to do after that time. It was the second time I had lost a job doing conservation nonprofit work, kind of by being a little bit too committed to things, not taking care of myself. And that fall, I enrolled out of desperation, feeling that I couldn't continue talking about this work unless I had, quote, a credentialed advanced degree. And so I went back to school with individuals that had been my colleagues and friends and now were my professors. Dr. Jason Hoeksema was my professor in the biology department, and then my dear friend Jody Skipper, who leads all the Behind the Big House programs in Holly Springs, was my advisor in the Southern Studies program. And I've always had imposter syndrome. I've always had a sense that my ideas were only mine, that they were not shared by anyone else, and got to this place where I was certain that I was going to fail out of school and everything that comes along with that. So all that to say, it took me to a place where I was waiting for my grades after having probably the worst spells of anxiety and depression I'd had most of my life, and got to the point where I finally got my grades. I convinced myself I failed out, and I got a 4.0. And yeah, it's humorous because so much so I was convinced that I was a fraud, that I had told myself nothing would ever be enough. And so after telling myself I was going to fail out, and then getting my grades and getting a 4.0, I decided nothing was ever going to be enough. And so I tried to take my life that night in Holly Springs. My wife at the time thankfully found me, and I had been in and out of mental health rehab since 2020. So I'm not saying this lightly when these things weigh on me more than they should. And to the point where I remember that fall I gave a talk. I assume my dad's not listening right now, but he tuned into the one fall of 2020 when I was doing a lot of reflections around this, particularly in Holly Springs, a property, just a quick aside, named Duck Pond that was left to the county as a food resource in the 1930s during the Depression. And I had heard in the grapevine that that property was only legally open to individuals that were white. And so I inquired around it, and being in a small town, our tax assessor was like, yeah, I can pull that record for you. And lo and behold, it's still on the docket that this was left for the food resources as a fishing place during the Depression and for all citizens of Marshall County except African Americans. And that's still in the books. And that is a property that has some of the greatest biodiversity for a non-protected landscape. So I went out there that afternoon after giving the talk over Zoom, and I remember crying a lot, which I'm not proud of, but my dad had tuned in, and he just could not understand why I was putting all this stuff on my shoulders. Or as he said, why are you responsible for these things that happened in the past? And I got to this place where it was kind of a dual thing of feeling that it wasn't in any way a responsibility, but I felt I could not continue in my engagement around this work of conservation without acknowledging that the human aspect is as prominent, if not the most prominent aspect of conservation. And that the work I do on a day-to-day basis is ecology, but 99% of it is dealing with human personalities. So I started thinking about the context of membership and citizenship and what it is to have agency and what it is to advocate for those without agency. The last few weeks, it's been really around what is due process? What is it that is allowed to those that do not have a voice? And being that I'm not a formal member of this congregation, I'm going through a divorce right now. It's been a pretty trying time with everything else going on in my life, but strangely enough, things started clicking when I started leaning into community. I started breaking down the assumptions around not being enough as an ecologist, as a birder, as a husband, as a son, as a friend, and started seeing what would happen if I just showed up. And it really made a large evolution in knowing how much agency I have, and that how much, in the same breath, how much agency I have, but also how much my agency is not ubiquitous across the landscape. That it's very particular to me, it's very particular to my upbringing, to the melanin content of my skin, of being a large male. So I started thinking about this in the context of what does it mean to be neighborly? What does it mean to engage with community? Wendell Berry is probably certainly is my largest influence in thinking around this context, but he talks about if you're going to be neighborly, you have to know your neighbors. You can't be neighborly in a convocation of strangers. And it's a really difficult thing to swallow right now when we are in a landscape, both literally and figuratively, when we are trying to make as much divisions as we can. I do this constantly in my work. In ecology, when you get to the genetic level, they talk about lumpers and splitters. And this should be actually a different species because it's got these different characteristics to it. And I think about this a lot when thinking about what we call biodiversity uplift. What's the most you can do to uplift, as the trite aphorism of, rising tides or whatever it is lifts all ships from an economic standpoint, but that translates into ecology too. And so I think about, these kind of known relationships that thankfully are becoming more commonplace, but thinking about things like monarchs and milkweeds, and that monarchs, can only lay their eggs wherever they'd like, but their larvae, their caterpillars, can only feed on milkweed species native to North America, which is fascinating to think about, but that is across the board the norm for a lot of our insects. And a lot of times we take into consideration the value of a species, whether that is humans themselves or plants or birds or other wildlife, as being dependent upon how we view things in the context of loss. And I think about species like goldenrod, which is a not highly regarded species. I became enamored with it literally last summer because I had a neighbor who, this is very telling of me, she would come out with her dog twice a day at the same time. My dog would let me know she was coming. I started working from home remotely in fall of 23, and so part of just getting outside and being outside my house and not being behind a desk talking to people on screens all day was getting out in my yard. And in doing so, I got to know Cindy better. For about 12 months, I only knew her as the mother of Honey, who her dog was. It's like a Larry David episode. So many months had passed, I was too embarrassed to actually ask this woman's name. I knew more about her dog's health than her own name. And so as we would get to talking each time, the two dogs would see each other, do their little dance, sniff butts, and then would kind of ignore us and do the dog thing. And over time, I started noticing, man, these dogs are always eating goldenrod leaves. And I didn't think much of it. And then I asked Cindy if she had noticed it when we would talk, and she was like, "Yeah, what is that, Mitch? Is that a good plant?" And I was like, "Well, what's a good plant?" And I began asking some friends that have dogs and been like, "Hey, curiosity, have you ever seen your dog eating goldenrod?" They're like, "I don't know." And so they just started paying attention that fall. And every person I talked to, they're like, "You know what? They like go crazy around it." And this is a huge aside, but what I found out from doing some research is goldenrod, which is probably the greatest flowering family in North America. There's over 120 species worldwide. We have 80 to 100 of them here in North America. That it's been known for probably thousands of years that it's like a very significant calming of the stomach. It's a diuretic, and so dogs have a tremendous sense of smell. And so my dog had been feeding on this for a long time, but I began to start thinking about this too, and it's like we consider goldenrod a trash species because it's everywhere. So is the abundance of something the relative rate of how we look at its value? And what we know now is that monarchs, yes, they can only lay their eggs on milkweed, but when that first generation of monarchs leaves the mountains of Central America, of Mexico, where they spend their winters, and start moving north, they're just now getting to the Mississippi coast, and they'll be up around this way in another few weeks. They're going to have 4 generations from the time they leave central Mexico, coming up to the Mississippi coast. They'll have another generation breed, come up to the northern part of Mississippi, a 3rd generation do the same thing up near Chicago, and then the 4th generation. In 1 year, 4 generations removed from individuals that spent their winter down in the central highlands of Mexico are going to have that final population up in the late summer around southern Canada and the Great Lakes. And then that last generation, all of these adults that are 4 generations removed from the ones that made that long journey, are going to fly all the way back to central Mexico. Except they could care less about milkweed. That special plant that we are just encouraging everyone, you've got to plant milkweed in your yard. The main thing these endangered butterflies are feeding on during that fall migration, the thousands of miles they've got to journey to make it back to central Mexico, are our asters, are these trash plants that are everywhere. And so what does it mean to have revere or reverence or regard for a plant if we only look at it in the context of what is being lost? And I think about this too in the context of what it means to be neighborly. I know that I have done a disservice to myself and a lot of my work over the years by assuming certain individuals probably didn't have the same perspectives as me, probably didn't vote the same. So they probably had no interest in engaging with this sort of community work, particularly around wildlife and habitats. And I've recognized that this little Holly Wild group I started last summer, just trying to pick up some of the pieces of what was lost with Audubon, that, again, you can't be convivial in a convocation of strangers. You cannot pick and choose, and I say this kind of as devil's advocate, but you cannot pick and choose who your allies are going to be, particularly in these times. And so I think about this in terms of belonging and what it means to be accepted in a community. Last summer, I met 2 younger girls. I think one's a teenager, one's in her early 20s, and the older one was working at she worked the graveyard shift at the gas station on Highway 7. So when she would get off work a little before 5 a.m., her and her younger friend would take walks around the neighborhood before the sun was up. And last summer, I saw them out one morning before I was about to get up and go to the gym, and they have a love for my dog, Ophelia, so just as a surprise, I opened the door and let Ophelia go out while they were out there looking at my flowers. So, a little bit later, I joined them, and half hour later, we're literally sitting on my steps talking about everything under the sun in our little town at like 6 a.m. in the morning. And we get to talking, and there's a group of, there's 2 ladies that Destiny knows. She helped me with the project this January, but these 2 ladies are nuns that came down from the Great Lakes area in the early 60s to teach at the segregated African American school in Holly Springs and have lived there ever since. And I had gotten to know them because they just have a beautiful garden with all these lilies and tulips and daffodils and things like that. And they had a lot of native redbuds and other things that had encroached into their garden. And so anyways, I developed a relationship with them and talked to them about removing those for them, and then ended up turning into a project of putting them in other places in town. But as I was talking to those two girls and describing these two ladies, and I refer to them as the sisters. You know, they're in their early 80s or so. And these two girls turned to me and they're like, wait, they're sisters? And I was like, well, they're not like actual sisters, but you know, they're nuns. And they were like, oh. I was like, what do you guys mean? And I don't mean to be offensive here, but they looked at each other and kind of laughed, and they were like, well, we just thought that they were some old lesbos. And I was like, well, I mean, maybe, I don't know, but like, you know. And as we're kind of laughing there, they get quiet and they kind of look at each other. And I do not know these girls that well. And they literally are neighbors that I've gotten to know from tending to my wildflowers and stuff and play with my dog in the yard. But they turned to me and they said, well, you know what everybody in town calls you? And I was like, no, I don't. And they looked at each other and they were like, well, you're not going to be mad, right? And I was like, I mean, I don't know. And they said, well, everybody in town calls you the big gay bird guy. And I was like, cool. I mean, if you had told me that probably 5 years ago, I would have been destroyed. I don't know why I would have been destroyed. Maybe of all this things that were brought up in my childhood around, quote, being gay or whatever people want to say. But I was in a weird way kind of honored by it, that these two young girls that I didn't know, that knew nothing about me, knew nothing about my background, just liked the fact that I was engaging with them around these wildflowers and talking about birds and plants and stuff. And the same with these two big gay lesbos that were nuns in our community. And so this notion of like starting to recognize that we don't get to pick and choose who our neighbors are going to be and who our community is. And that spans the distance of not just physical humans in our environment, but also too those that move through time and space annually on a regular basis. And I was talking to my mom this morning about this because I was out yesterday at Home Place Pastures in Como, Mississippi, helping my friend the Bartletts there put in some native wildflower meadows, and had some Ole Miss students come and help, and Marshall took us on a tour. And right now, this time of year, it's hard for me to be outside and not be freaking out because every 10 minutes something else showing up. So I had my first of season prothonotary warbler show up yesterday out there at Como. And Marshall's been working there for over 10 years, turning this former ag operation into a regenerative agricultural operation from row crops into grass-fed beef and cattle and hogs. And so we're talking about all those different concepts and ecology and things, and then we come around this lake that's an old farm pond. It's probably been there 75 years. And I see a flash of yellow. I actually heard it first, and then I went looking and saw the flash of yellow. And these kids are like, what is this guy's deal? Like, he's losing it. Like, what's going on? And I was describing to them this bird it's our only warbler that nests in cavities. They only go to older, mature woodlands around wetlands and things like this. And Marshall was not managing this place for habitat. But like in that engagement out there that day, that bird showed back up. And I don't know how far removed that bird is from its ancestors, but its ancestors could have been coming to that same lake for 100 generations. And so thinking about the context too of like, what does it mean to protect something? Who gets to say what story should be told? Who gets to say, who gets to be the storytellers? Who gets to say which birds are more important? Which plants are more important? Which agendas are more important? Who is the most discriminated? And what I found talking to my mom this morning is we were talking about birds and all different things, and she was like, you know, some mornings, and again, my mom's recently retired, I got her to take a naturalist course, so she's like drinking Kool-Aid, she's in on the birds and stuff, getting some native landscaping done at her house, but she was like, some mornings I just sit out here and I listen to American robins, and I know that they're like really, really common, but like, I just find them so beautiful, and their songs so beautiful. And I was like, yeah, Mom, and like 5 years ago, I would have probably dismissed that and been like, you really need to go bird. Like, that's not birding. But the reality is like, to who? Who gets to say which species are important? You know, I love talking to kids about this. The scientific epithet for American robins is Turdus migratorius. So these birds actually do massive, we have them here year round, but they do massive migrations up to Alaska and things like that. And will actually
do these huge migrating flocks that will, kind of like passenger pigeons used to do, that will completely block out the sky. So, it really depends on context and who gets to tell these stories. But I've already gone way over. But one of the last things I wanted to talk about is I've been practicing since about 2017 when I first got sober, been practicing Buddhism, and I've really gotten into the Tibetan practice. And many of y'all may have heard of Pema Chodron, who studied underneath Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, who was a Tibetan that escaped during the communist revolution in China and has escaped Tibet. And they talk about in Tibet, they have these practices of Tonglen, and it's about giving and taking, and not in a physical sense, but in terms of in your meditation of giving and receiving and holding space for other people's sorrow, holding space for other people's uncertainty and fear, and that fear is not something that's owned by one person, but it's a universal thing that we all share in. And so they have these, what they call compassion cards, and it basically goes through all the precepts in the Tonglen engagement. And each of them start with just a short quote, and then it has an explanation on the back. And so I've been doing these every morning the past few weeks, getting back into this practice. And this one from last week, so I also too, I injured my back, literally just from sitting in front of a computer for 8 hours a day for the first time in my life. And so I had a lot of downtime last week when my mom happened to be in town and was able to take care of me. But I kept reflecting on this one. And the tagline for the card was to be grateful to everyone. And the back talks about, and this is so important to me, as I've gotten through a lot of own engagements, noticing things in my how I present myself, how I engage with others, and working through things that I think would be more mindful, more intentional, paying more attention. When you see someone else displaying things that you've been working through or trying to get over, there is nothing worse in the world than like literally smelling your own shit. Seeing someone else manifesting those things you've been working through. But in the notion of being grateful to everyone, Pema Chodron talks about others will always show you exactly where you are stuck. They say or do something and you automatically get hooked into a familiar way of reacting, shutting down, speeding up, or getting all worked up. When you react in the habitual way with anger, greed, and so forth, it gives you a chance to see your patterns and work with them, honestly and compassionately. Without others provoking you, you may remain ignorant of your painful habits and cannot train in transforming them into the path of awakening. And so I really find that oftentimes I've made more progress doing community conservation work the last 12 months by coming into the room and not telling people what they're doing wrong, not telling people why their actions are actually causing more harm than good, and trying to understand why, not why, but how people arrived at their own narrative, how they arrived at the story that they're telling themselves, how they arrived at taking the actions that they think are most beneficial. And there's a interview from Wendell Berry, and this will be the last thing I'll say, but I think this was in the second Obama administration, so I think this was coming around 2013 or 14, and he was finishing up an interview at a Wisconsin book festival. And like most people that interview Wendell Berry, he was this interviewer was very, very humbled and shy, and so he asked the last question and said hey, look, this is a thing I just want to ask you, but if you had one last word to say, what would it be? And I'll just read Wendell's very poignant response. And he just says, oh, no, I won't be dealing in that. I just don't trade in that commodity of last words, or what would be the thing I would tell President Obama if I could tell him something. I don't think it's reducible to anything short enough to tell the president. I don't think that I know anything that's reducible to a last word. Our people like to trade in that kind of stuff, but it's stuff. It really doesn't amount to very much. What really interests me is the possibility that we humans can make sense. This is an issue. This is a formal issue of the greatest urgency and gravity. What are the conditions within which we humans can make sense? Within what limits are our minds effective? So he says, I've been griping about this for some time with my friends, this hot take saying basically we've had 2 generations of college-bred people now who have really been indoctrinated with the idea that every big problem has a big solution. And I just don't believe it. The big problems we have now are going to be solved, if they are ever solved, by hundreds of people accepting local responsibilities for small problems. They're never going to get famous, They're never going to get tenure, but this is the way it has to work. We're not really very smart, we humans. And the idea that someone could come up with a big solution to a big problem is always dangerous. It always comes up with this simple solution. People who make simple solutions make trouble. And they're always surprised by the trouble that they make. So, to hell with last words. Let's try to make one sentence that's rightly positioned within a manageable context so that we can utter it to somebody and they'll understand it, and we'd then be on our way to defining a job of work that we could actually do. The last thing I'll say is something that I revisit every morning when I wake up. It's kind of how I start my day. I don't even know the origin of this quote. It's been bastardized and passed around so many times, but it's something that has resonated with me in my happiest and most difficult moments and hours. But basically the notion is that there are only two parts to ourselves: what is loved and what is longing to be loved. And the actions that we take, the ownership that we acknowledge in terms of our agency and engagement, really comes down to this, and really comes down to who is it that we are wanting to be in communion with, and who is it that we feel that we are allowed to be in communion with. And so I just want to thank this group of community members for being so welcoming to me and allowing me to share with y'all today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mitch. That was amazing. And so now we have some words from John O'Donohue as we release our chalice flame from his poem For Longing. And Mitch, if you'll help blow out our flame. May you have the courage to listen to the voice of desire that disturbs you when you have settled for something safe. May you have the wisdom to enter generously into your own unease, to discover the new direction your longing wants you to take. And may the forms of your belonging in love, creativity, and friendship be equal to the grandeur and the call of your soul. Blessed be. And if you will rise in body and spirit for our closing hymn, number 163, for the earth forever turning, 163.
Everybody ready? Reciting our congregational blessing, which is printed in the order of service if you don't know it. Go in peace, believe in peace,
create peace, and be peace.
Blessed be. Y'all stick around for our town hall and our potluck. Thank you.
Uh,